Poor people are working to buy Gucci. The middle class is working to buy BMWs, but the rich and the ultra-rich are working to buy businesses. Now, I know this is a big overgeneralization, but there are two playbooks that you can follow when it comes to building your wealth, and most people don't even know what they are. And you have playbook number one, which is what most people follow, which is why most people stay average at best. Or you have playbook number two, which is the playbook of the rich and the ultra-rich, which most people don't even understand. And anybody can follow the playbook of the rich and the ultra-rich, but you have to understand how it works first. So let me break it down. This is what playbook one looks like in an ideal case scenario where you go to school, you do good in school, that way you can get a good job. Maybe this is a professional job, maybe you become a doctor, you become an attorney, you become an accountant, you become an engineer, you get some good paying job, that way you have more money to invest into something like your 401k, that way you can hopefully retire with $1 million or a couple $1 million. This is the ideal case situation for the vast majority of people, and unfortunately most people will not make it that far to have a couple $1 million when it comes to retirement. But this is what I would say is the ideal case situation for the majority of people. This is playbook one, but the rich and people who aspire to really become wealthy are working with a completely different playbook. Let me show you. Playbook two for the rich, the ultra rich and the wealthy is number one, learn about money. Learn how money works. Understand how our economic system works. Then number two, learn how to scale your income. I'll explain exactly what that means. Then number three, learn how your money can make you more money instead of just you working to make more money for you. And then number four is work, ideally, to have more money than you know how to spend. See, it's a different game for a different person. Because most poor people and middle class people, and I know I say this in a very just kind of extreme way, but most poor people and middle class people are working to buy or finance nice things so you look like you're rich. What the wealthy and the rich, the real rich, are doing is they want to have so much money that they can go and buy the nice things and not have to worry about the price because it is their assets that are buying it for them. But you have to really know how this playbook works. So let me break this down with an example from somebody that I know personally. By trade, I am a licensed attorney. And the reason why I'm an attorney is because my parents really wanted me to be a doctor, but I didn't want to go to medical school. When my parents found out that I wasn't going to go to medical school, my dad said that if I want to keep any pride in the family, I have to at least become an attorney. So I went to law school, passed the bar exam, got my lawyer's license, and never worked a day as an attorney. But that's besides the point. I spent a lot of time with lawyers. And the way that many lawyers think is you bill by the hour. And lawyers, as we all know, charge a lot of money per hour. So the way that many lawyers think is if I can bill at, say, $200 an hour, and I can get 20 hours worth of billable work a week, that means that I am going to be able to make $4,000 a week. A lot of money. That's about $16,000 a month, which is a good income. And then what you'll see happen is some go-getters will actually do this. They will get this $4,000 a week. Not all attorneys, but some attorneys will do this, and then they'll say, I want to have more because I'm a go-getter and I spent all this time in school and I want to keep crushing it because they have that ambition. And then what they do is instead of billing 20 hours a week, they're going to put in more hours. They're going to try to find more clients, find more businesses to work with, and now they're going to be able to bill 40 hours a week at this $200 an hour. Now, instead of them making $4,000 a week, they grow their income to $8,000 a week. You know this 40 is times the $200 an hour. Now they're really starting to make some money. Now instead of making $16,000 a month, they're making $32,000 a month. And then they say, wow, this is pretty good. I can buy some nice things. I can have some really nice cars. I can go on some nice vacations. I have a lot of really cool stuff, but how can I grow this some more? And then they realize, well, if I can go after some bigger clients who can pay me more money per hour, now I can make even more money. So then what you'll see some of the top dogs in the legal field do is they're gonna work to grow their hourly rate from $200 an hour to $500 an hour. $500 an hour times 40 billable hours a week is $20,000 a week. Now we're talking serious money. We're talking about $80,000 a month, close to $1 million a year. This would be the 0.1% of Playbook 1. I mean, this is really the top tier, top dogs of this Playbook 1 where you are very ambitious. You got a good career and you really worked to drive your way up in this career. I mean, 99.9% of people are not going to be able to earn anywhere near this type of income, but you can start to see where it is limited by you. So let me now compare this to an older friend slash mentor of mine, and I'm going to call him George, who is also an attorney. And George started off in this same boat and then started doing something a little bit different because he realized that there's going to be a limit to how many hours he could work a week. I mean, he was spending a lot of hours trying to find new businesses to work with, to find new clients, but then realized that if he could pass on his work to other attorneys, he could have other attorneys do the work and make a big percentage of the work, and then he can just get a referral fee or a percentage on the work that he brings them. Now he can bring work to many different attorneys. Well, he gets a little bit of money from each attorney that he brings the work to. Now there's really no limit to how much work that he can get because it's not all dependent on him. Fast forward to today, and Attorney George has 70 attorneys that work for him. And each one of these 70 attorneys is working to bill somewhere between $200 an hour to $500 an hour. In fact, I think he has some attorneys that bill even higher than this, but somewhere in the general range of $200 an hour to $500 an hour. So now let's do the math. If we assume that each one of these 70 attorneys is billing out an average of, let's say, $300 an hour, because we know that attorneys that work with businesses charge a lot of money, and they're only billing out, let's just say, 25 hours of time a week, that means that his firm is making approximately $525,000 a week in revenue. Now, of course, most of that money is not his because he's got to pay his attorneys for that time, but let's assume that he's only taking a percentage of this. Now, many times what you see happen is if you bring another attorney business, they're going to pay you somewhere between 10% to 33% of the amount of money that they generate. So if we assume he's only making 10% of the revenue that his attorneys are generating, that means that Attorney George is now making $52,000 a week, and he doesn't have to step foot in court or write a contract or review a business document because he has 70 other attorneys doing that for him. But that's not even the best part. The best part is not that Attorney George can make $52,000 a week, which is more than double what the top dog here was making, billing at $500 an hour for 40 hours a week. The best part now is when we think about the exit strategy, because now the exit strategy here in Playbook 1 is you work to make some money and then you use your money to go out and buy other assets, right? Stocks, maybe real estate. You put some money in a 401k, and unfortunately, most people in Playbook 1 have no idea what to do. Most people have no investments, statistically, and I'm talking about including your 401k IRA. Most people in this situation have zero investments. So now, if you're making a lot of money and you have some investments, you're already ahead of half of people. And most people here who are investing their money still are significantly short because unfortunately, most people have no financial education. I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too, that are making a lot of money, that have a lot of nice toys. You drive a lot of nice cars. You go on a lot of fancy vacations. You go on a lot of expensive trips and have a lot of expensive stuff, which means you can make a lot of money, but you have a lot of liabilities. So now when it comes time for you to retire, many people then realize they don't have enough, and then they have to start downsizing in their life. So now the exit strategy here is you get closer to your retirement and you hope that your kids have some money to take care of you. You have Social Security or you have your 401k that can hopefully fund a very nice retirement. And some people, right, this is what we talk about, that if you're in this boat, yes, you can build wealth. You can retire with a couple $1 million if you just use your money strategically, okay? But that's not what we're talking about here, right? Playbook 1, the exit strategy is that you have some assets to fall back on and you can be okay. For here, Attorney George, his exit strategy is a little bit different. Now, Attorney George has been making a lot of money over the years and he's been using his money to buy a lot of real estate, but that's not the point here. He has a great portfolio of commercial real estate, but I'm going to completely just ignore that here. See, it's not just that Attorney George is making $200,000 a month or $52,000 a week. He has a business that's making more than $2.4 million a year in profit. And so now when you own this asset, this business that's making $2.4 million a year in profit, where, yeah, Attorney George could go on the beach and not work to get paid, although he is the managing partner, he's essentially the CEO of this firm, so yeah, he has to work, but he could replace himself, which means he can sell this business. So if he wanted to sell this business and move on, he could maybe sell this business for 10 times earnings. So this business is making what, $2.4 million a year in profit, and we're being very conservative here. If it's making $2.4 million a year in profit and he sold it for 10 times profits, that means he's sitting on a business that's worth $24 million. That's a very different exit strategy because now he could sell this business, get a $24 million check, and now go out and buy more real estate, buy some other toys, buy some other things, but also continue to generate cash flow from the investments that he's generating. It's a very different game plan, but also a very different playbook. And a lot of people now assume that this playbook is reserved for people that have a lot of money. But that's not the case. In order to succeed with this playbook, you have to just think a little bit differently. There are 3 things that you want to pay attention to if you want to succeed with this playbook. And again, it's not for everybody, but you want to understand that this playbook exists because nobody tells you this side of the playbook. There are 3 things you have to understand if you want to be able to succeed with playbook 2, and these are number 1, risk, number 2, leverage, number 3, scale. Let me start by talking about risk. When Attorney George is going out and trying to grow his business, he has to go out and sign big contracts to lease an office space with a personal guarantee that even if his business goes bankrupt, that his personal finances will guarantee the lease. So if he goes bankrupt, his business goes bankrupt, his life savings have to keep paying for the lease, otherwise he gets sued. He has to take certain risks in order to build this business. But if you work for Attorney George and the business goes bankrupt, well, you lose your job, but you don't have to keep paying back debts to the business. See, if Attorney George goes out and invests $500,000 of his own money to advertise and find more clients, that's his risk. But the employees don't have to pay him back if that doesn't work. And so when you go out and do anything risky, you have more potential upside, but it comes with risk. And with that risk, you get the higher potential return. And the return is the profit potential, but you don't get any of that profit unless you take some of the risk. And that's the difference between being the business owner versus just being an employee in the business. Attorney George built the business with risk. And the risk was, number 1, his time. Then he invested his own money. And then, of course, he had all the contracts and everything he had to do in order to build the business. And if those failed, well, then he'd be the one that's on the hook. The second thing that you have to understand is leverage. And by leverage, I mean, what can you do beyond just you? Because Attorney George might only be able to bill out 40 hours of his own time. And if he was thinking, you know what, maybe if I really wanted to make more money, I could stop seeing my wife, I could stop seeing my kids, and I can work to bill out 60 hours of time. And that doesn't mean he's working 60 hours a week because that's only the billable work. That means you have to do another 50, 60 hours of work to find that 60 billable hours of work. Because when you're an attorney, not every piece of work that you do is actually billable because you have to work to find the client, you have to work to make sure the client is happy, you have to work to keep up with the research and keep learning the work. So there's a lot of work that's outside of the billable work that you have to do as well. But still, there's a limit to how many hours a week that you can work. But this is where leverage was, how can he hire more people to do work? That way he can get paid even when he's not working. But see why this is so difficult, because if you can charge $500 an hour, or $200 an hour, or $50 an hour, it doesn't really matter. If you're paying somebody else to do it, that means you got to pay them a fee, and you only make a small percentage of that. Maybe you make 10, 15, 20%. So now, instead of you making $200 an hour, you're making 20, 30, 40 bucks an hour, which is a whole lot less than $200 an hour. And this is where it can be kind of scary, because why would you want to give somebody else all that money when you can keep the bulk of it for yourself and do the work yourself? And you also don't have to worry about trusting somebody else, because what if they do a bad job and they ruin your name? You can start to see where that's a little scary. But this is where leverage is all about. If you want to be able to really scale and grow, we'll talk about scale in a minute, but if you really want to be able to build bigger, you have to be able to leverage time. And that means for every hour in a day, how much can you produce? And there's only so many things that you can do. I mean, if you are an attorney, there's only so much work that you can do in an hour. There's only 1 hour worth of work. But if you have 10 attorneys, now you have 10 potential hours worth of work that can be done. If you have 100 attorneys, that's 100 potential hours worth of work within that same hour. So now the question is, how can you leverage whatever you have? And that could be time and that can be money. Because Attorney George kind of does both. He leverages money by paying other attorneys, and he leverages time by getting more out of that same time than if he was doing the work himself. But you can see how that's risky because, well, there's a cost you have to pay, and there's no guarantee that you're going to make any money, right? Risk comes with that as well, which comes with number 3, which is scale, which is how can you grow beyond you? How can you have unlimited potential, upside potential. Because there are some businesses that you can't really scale. If you were producing, I don't know, soap bars, and you were only doing them in your own basement, there's only so many soap bars that you can build and sell. Maybe you can hire a few people from your neighborhood to build soap bars, but after that, you might not be able to scale more, especially if you can't source more materials. But if you can move it to a manufacturing plant and you can hire more people and you can get more raw materials, now you can scale more, but you have to have that ability. We saw this big shift of businesses moving digital because of this sole factor here, scale. Because if you owned a storefront and you were selling soap, well, there's only so many people that can buy soap at one time. I mean, maybe you might have a long line out the door if you were really attractive, but I mean, there's only one person that can purchase from one register at a time. So you might be limited to a few sales a minute, if that. But now when you take it digital, the advantage here of scale is you can have 100 people buying in 1 minute. You can have 1,000 people buying in 1 minute, just depending on whatever the capacity is of your service. But now there's really no limit when you go digital because now you have that scaling potential. So now when you're thinking about how to do this, you want to think about scale as well. And this was one of the most difficult concepts for me to understand, because for me in the beginning, I started off in the event planning space. I was essentially hosting parties in college. It was an event planning company, but I was essentially just hosting parties. But the problem was I wasn't getting paid unless I was hosting a party. Not to mention the fact that I hated the industry because I wasn't into partying or drinking, but that's besides the point. If I wasn't hosting a party, I wasn't getting paid. There was no scale. So from there, I moved into real estate. I started investing in real estate. And then I realized I needed more money to invest in real estate because real estate is expensive. So I got my real estate salesperson's license and started doing that. But I realized, again, I got caught up in scale. There was only so much that I could do. Now, sure, maybe I could have grown more, but I didn't see the opportunity for me at that moment. So then I shifted online. I got into e-commerce. But then I realized for me that the e-commerce industry that I was in wasn't my passion, which is why I switched again into financial media. I started building briefs media. Now we have things like market briefs. You might have heard me talk about market briefs a lot on my channel. Market briefs is a free financial newsletter. But the reason why that fits this scale side, I'm going to focus just on the business side of that, is I don't write market briefs. I've helped coach the team on how we talk about certain financial topics, and we know what it should read like, but I don't have to read it. And well, we could send out market briefs to 5 people or 500,000 people or even more. I mean, there's no limit to how many people we can send it out to. So it gives us the opportunity to scale. And so this is where now, for me, as I build something, I look for this same thing as well. How can I build something that doesn't necessarily rely on me, that you can leverage more output within the same 60 minutes? How can you do something that can grow beyond you? Because ultimately, if you want to build a true business, if you really want to build something beyond you, you have to think about the ability of you stepping away. Because if you can't step away, you don't really have a business. You just created your own job. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you don't have an exit strategy. Because if you wanted to sell, what would you do? And this is where, if you ever wanted to stop for whatever reason, whether something happens bad or you just want to sell because you're done, well, you want to be able to think about how you can potentially step away. But that requires you to have something that you can step away from, and you want to have the scalable growth as well. But it all comes with risk, because the reality is building a business is scary, it's risky, and it's not for everybody. And people get excited about the financial potential because you can make all this money, but it's not for everybody. It comes with a lot of stress and a lot of headaches, and it's a different type of stress than when you're an employee, because of course being an employee is stressful as well, because now you have to work under somebody else's guidance and under somebody else's rules, and there's risk and there's stress associated with that, but it's different than when you're the business owner. When you're the business owner, you get access to the profits. You're working for the profits. When you're an employee, you're working for the salary. Me, as the CEO of Briefs Media, I get paid a salary. Me, as the owner of Briefs Media, I'm entitled to the profits. The profits go to the owners. You can sell the ownership, but if you're an employee, you don't get that ownership. That's not something that you get normally as an employee. So now, as we think about how the rich and the ultra-rich play in a different playbook, it doesn't necessarily mean that you start with millions of dollars, because a lot of people don't. Most people who become very wealthy don't start with a big handout. They start with very little. But if you want to be able to grow and scale, you have to understand the different playbooks. Because there's nothing wrong with playbook 1 if that's what you want to do. But if you want to have a completely different life, if you want to have something very different, you got to understand the different playbook, But also understand you don't want to follow Playbook 2 just because you want to make a lot of money. I mean, you want to do it because you believe in something and you have value, and this is something like you have the entrepreneurial bug. You know you have it or you don't. If you don't like the idea of working on evenings and weekends, you don't have the entrepreneurial bug, because guess what? It's a lot of work, especially in the beginning. In the first few years, you're going to be working evenings, weekends, holidays, because it's all on you. But as you start to leverage and scale, then you can start passing on more things. But again, it's a different type of stress because you're taking on risk. If you're signing an office lease, you're taking on risk. If you're taking on debt, you're taking on risk. And especially in the early stages, guess what? When you go and sign the paperwork, every paperwork you sign is going to say, even if your business goes bankrupt, you're still on the hook. We want access to the home that you own. We want access to the car that you own. We want access to your personal bank accounts because we want to get paid even if your business is not getting paid. It's a risk you have to take. And the upside to that risk is you get the profits. Downside to that risk is, well, things can go wrong. So now that I've gone over these two different playbooks, I would love to hear from you. Which playbook would you prefer to play with? Playbook number 1, playbook number 2, and why? Let me know down in the comments. And of course, if you got some value out of this video, all I ask from you is to hit that thumbs up button, to hit the subscribe button, and then share this video with somebody who you think will get some value as well. You can use OPM, other people's money. Use somebody else's dollars to then invest. That way now you can pay them back a little bit of interest, and then you get to keep the profits. But when it doesn't work, that means now not only did you lose your money that you put into your investment, but now you still owe these people back their money plus interest.